Hi everybody, welcome back to At Home with Economics. I'm Alice Meredith, and here we talk about stretching your dollar and how economic and political policy in the United States is going to affect your dollar moving forward. This is the last day we're going to talk about the economic collapse in Venezuela. This is the last in our series. It's been a few days since I did the last video, but we're back out here again. It's very hot today, so I'm going to try to make this short so that I can turn the air conditioning back on. And so we're going to talk about the last factor of the main factors in the economic collapse in Venezuela, which is the nationalization of industries. So what is the nationalization of industries? That's when the national government owns all of the factories, businesses, ways of making things, means of production, in a certain industry. And in Venezuela, under Hugo Chavez, between 2005 and the early 2010s, he nationalized many companies, most especially the oil company, which we talked about before, but as well as transportation, agriculture, telecommunications, and many other things. And this led to the government getting a lot of money to support their social programs, as we talked about before. But it also led to a drop in private businesses in Venezuela, especially in foreign investment, because people who were thinking about opening a factory in Venezuela really wouldn't want to, because there was a good chance that in the future the government would seize the factory and not compensate the owners of the factory in a fair way. And that's another factor with the nationalization of industries, is that what the government did was they bought the factories and things that already existed, the power plants and the various things, but they didn't pay the people who already owned them a fair market value. It would be one thing if the government, for some reason, wanted to nationalize, say, the electric grid, but they paid the electric companies a fair amount to purchase the power stations and the infrastructure and things that they had built. But in the case of Venezuela and in many other countries where this has happened, it has happened through the government coming in saying, you have to sell it to us. We're only going to give you half of what it's worth or less. Or sometimes, like in the case of the USSR, they just took it and they by force. So why does this matter for us? Oh, sorry. Let me go back a little bit to what happened in Venezuela. Why did this lead to economic collapse? Why did this contribute to the economic collapse? That's because governments tend to mismanage businesses. They don't have the same goals as business owners in running businesses. And so they tend to not cut costs in the same way. They mismanage the businesses, and that leads to increasing costs that the government has to put in, which cuts into the money that the Venezuelan government could put towards their social programs. And so when the government of Venezuela was getting all of their money from the oil revenues between about 2004 and 2014, when that was really high, they took too much money from the oil company, didn't reinvest enough of it, put too much towards social programs, which led to disrepair in the oil factories, which now have the oil companies basically collapsed along with the government because they ran out of money to pay workers and things like that. Sorry, there's a train coming through. So this is another problem. This is the problem that contributed to the collapse in Venezuela. the companies were not making as much money as they had been before, and therefore the government was not able to sustain the companies nor the social programs. And so it led to the loss of production, like things not being made, so the shortages and things like that we were seeing in Venezuela. Okay, so why does this matter? Because it's important to, there's a lot of talk about the Democratic candidates for the 2020 presidential candidates for the election, about them being whether or not they're socialist, or what does democratic socialist mean, and what's the difference? I've been thinking about this for the last couple of days, because there is a difference between social programs and wanting to forcefully nationalize industries. Like, for example, saying we're going to buy all of the electric companies, all the electric companies. So that would be closer to communism, socialism. Although it's important to note that Venezuela, in the time period of Hugo Chavez, and currently, they call themselves democratic socialists, which is the same thing that Bernie Sanders is saying. Well, we're not socialists, we're democratic socialists. Okay, so, but none of the candidates, as far as I can tell, advocate things like nationalizing the electric grid, nationalizing transportation, or anything like that, nationalizing airlines or something. I haven't seen any indication that there are any candidates that are promoting things like that, which is a really great sign, because nationalizing industries, the government seizing companies without fair compensation, is unethical and immoral. I wanted to talk for a second about Rerum Novarum, which is a papal encyclical put out by Pope Leo the 13th in 1891. So this is quite a long time ago, but it was put out near the beginning of the USSR, after the and so it's important what was laid out in this, not just for Catholics, although I think Catholics should listen to the social teachings that the popes have put out, but it is a good argument on ethical and moral level that people of goodwill should listen to, at least. So this is what he had to say. For if all may justly strive to better their condition, neither justice nor the common good allows any individual to seize upon that which belongs to another, or, under the futile and shallow pretext of equality, to lay violent hands on another's possessions. So, there have been many, many other arguments against communism, but this is just in this papal encyclical laying out we cannot allow the government to forcefully, without just compensation, forcefully take somebody's property. Okay, so this is not to be allowed. So, and as I said, as far as I know, none of the Democratic candidates in the 2020 election are advocating anything close to what was happening in Venezuela. But I do want to bring up one point, which is that the thing that's the closest, which is troubling to me, is the plan put forth by many of the Democratic candidates, including Bernie Sanders, Pete Buttigieg, Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren, as we talked about before, the single-payer healthcare. So, single-payer healthcare is, as we talked about before, is when the government is the only entity that pays for the healthcare in the country. I am not sure whether any of them or all of them support having a private option, which would, if there were a private option, that would be better. But if there's not a private option, essentially it's saying that if only the government is allowed to pay doctors, hospitals, nurses, physical therapists, if only the national government is allowed to do that, that is essentially co-opting the rights of the doctors, nurses, hospitals, physical therapists, whatever, co-opting their rights to seek clients on their own and to charge whatever they choose to charge if people are willing to pay them for it. So the government would essentially be forcefully restricting individuals and businesses from conducting business, which is not exactly, but it is bordering on nationalization of the healthcare industry. So, as we talked about with Venezuela, when you nationalize an industry, it is going to usually it leads to mismanagement of that industry. It leads to shortages because there's not the right production of things, and that is really troubling, especially for something as important as healthcare. This is why countries that have a nationalized healthcare system have to ration their healthcare. We don't have to ration healthcare in the United States because if you can pay for it, you get it. You know, it's not like there's a shortage of doctors. There's not a shortage of MRI machines. But in countries where there is nationalized healthcare, there are shortages of doctors. There are shortages of availability of MRI machines and things like this, which we don't want to be messing around with our health. Yeah, everybody has access to the same healthcare in these countries, but what is that healthcare like? If they are rationing this, is going to not be as plentiful by definition. So to protect our own health and our family's health and our children's health, it's important that we safeguard that private industry. Now, could it use reforms? Probably. Should we nationalize it? Absolutely not. So that's all I have for today. And now I'm curious that we finished our Venezuela series. What are you interested in seeing more videos about? I'm going to be putting up a video about budgeting, which is the most basic part of home economics, very soon. But let me know if there's anything that you want to see down in the comments below, and let me know what you think about this video. Thank you, and God bless.